My name is Lorenzo Migrer. I'm going to be the chairman of this very important panel, this very important session for this major event. As you know, this year, well, we are holding this very important meeting here at the Museum of Classical Arts of Rome La Sapienza. First of all, welcome to all of you. And well, we are going to dedicate our time to something very fascinating. I'm an archaeologist, and for 8 years I was the director of the Egyptian Museum of the Vatican, and now I'm the director of the Museum of La Sapienza. It's a small museum, but anyhow, I'm really, really pleased to be here to welcome all of you. And also, we're going to listen to several different experiences. And, well, we are going to listen to very distinguished speakers. So very high-level speakers, people that are committed to trying to change the relationship, or at least trying to understand how the relationship between visitors, the audience, and museum spaces is changing. So they are committed to well, studying the content of museums and culture. So this is a time of change. We know that things are changing, and I had a beautiful experience in 2018. I went to Jelling Museum in Denmark, where there's an extraordinary museum, an incredible museum which I visited with my family. And my child is disabled, so it was incredibly interesting for me to see how my child usually is not able to pay attention, to devote a great deal of attention. But anyhow, well, this is an incredible museum where we felt like protagonists of a play, so like actors, and we even entered the hut of Vikings, and my child felt really engaged. So, well, as you can imagine, my experience in the Vatican museums was some time ago, quite a long time ago, where we didn't have digital tools. It was something very traditional. I remember that I spent entire days to write down things on how to move some objects from one window to another window. So this is what I had to do. And I had to display things, and at the same time I had to study artifacts. Well, today the world is changing totally. We have in front of us, we have conceptual challenges, as our speakers are going to tell us. Let's try and well, go over this virtual platform that we're using right now. Let's try to well, listen carefully to the members of this panel. Unfortunately, the keynote lecture by Sophie Brendan, unfortunately, will not be held because she can't be here with us. Let's start from Brendan Cieko, the founder of an incredible startup that is a startup in order to support museum curators, if I understood correctly. So for those who want to work on museum contents, and this is well, a tool in order to involve visitors more. So the floor to Brendan, if you can hear me, for the first speech. Thank you. So Brendan, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Brendan Cieko, and I am delighted to be here with you today. First and foremost, thank you to the Rome Museum exhibition and the organizing committee. I'm really excited to engage in this conversation with such an esteemed panel of experts on museum visitor engagement. In a moment, I'm going to share my screen so we can get started. So just bear with me one moment. If someone could just verbally indicate you can see my screen, that would be great. I think you can see my screen. Unless I hear otherwise, I am going to get started. Again, thank you for having me. Really excited and thrilled to be here to engage in conversation on what is a pretty deep and relevant topical matter in the museum and cultural space today, especially some of the more future-leaning items like the Phygital dimension. Before we get started, just to say a little bit about myself and what my team's been up to. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Cuseum. We work with several hundred museums and cultural institutions, primarily located in the North American region, but also around the world. And we've been doing this for about 7 or 8 years and love every minute and have engaged in lots of different research and dialogues in an effort to deepen and expand upon our understanding, the world's understanding of digital engagement and other avenues around visitor engagement. I want to focus on two primary channels today. I know we have a really wide array of panelists, so there's two areas where I want to spend most of my time in terms of presentation, and that's in the area of virtual programs, and later we'll talk a little bit about immersive experience. So throughout the pandemic, my team had hosted a wide variety of webinars to really dig deep into how museums were adapting in this age of COVID-19 and virtual engagement. We had our first webinar in early March of 2020, and 4,400 people registered to hear about how to keep your audiences engaged, entertained, and inspired in the age of coronavirus. And that was with Sima Rayo, the Deputy Director of the Akron Art Museum, and Scott Stolen, the Director and President at the Philbrook Museum of Art. And throughout the pandemic, we've been really fortunate and privileged to have so many voices from around the globe share best practices. And if you're interested in catching up on any of those items, they're online, they're free to access, and it's just a great way to bring the community together to hear about what's working, what's not working in just about every specific area. From that webinar series, if you will, one thing that we found emerging over and over again was this topic around virtual programs and what the impact or implications or opportunities were around revenue generation for cultural organizations. And so while the report where we surveyed over 500 museums about their activities and actions around virtual programs, we had the opportunity to learn about what the inputs to the virtual programs were, what the outputs, what the successes were, how much time invested per program type, and of course the revenue generation component, which is a growing topic of interest with some of the uncertainties around funding and the economy and so on. So that's available online. And I will say the 6 categories that we dove very deeply into in that report were virtual tours, virtual art classes, virtual classes and events, summer camps, virtual K through 12, and virtual galas. We wanted to cover what we saw as the primary or most common types of programs so that we could really dissect what was working and what wasn't working. And one of the interesting tidbits, which was actually a little bit higher than I was expecting, was, do you offer virtual programs? And 92%, an overwhelming majority, indicated, yes, that they offer virtual programs of some way, shape, or form. And this just greatly exceeded a survey that went out to museum directors about a year prior about how where digital fell as a priority or less of a priority. And so it was overwhelmingly clear that whether you're at a large museum or a small museum, a single-digit staff museum, that virtual programming was something that was key to the strategy. Turning the page to immersive technologies, and we'll dive a little bit deeper here. There's just been so much conversation and experimentation. Even the years leading up to what we now can call the pandemic era, and where we are today. And I want to focus a little bit about some of the things we're seeing holistically around virtual and augmented reality. Here is some information from the World Economic Forum and Goldman Sachs about the growth of AR and VR, specifically within the creative economy industries. And that, of course, includes museum, arts, and cultural institutions. So it's very clear that the year-to-year growth and expansion of this it shows no sign of slowing down across the creative economy. And so two other tidbits is the growth of this market is mainly attributed to the growing demand of the technology from the tourism industry, which includes attractions, which includes museums and cultural institutions. So a lot of that data is pointing to the interest and the demand being towards learning more about a place they're visiting. That's some research from Accenture. And I want to just point out recently, and it's honestly been a little bit fatiguing in all of our feeds, that Facebook, now called Meta, is going, both feet in on this topic of the metaverse, and we're seeing record amounts of interest and investment and conversation about what this means across all industries. And it's kind of a jarring thing to think about in a sector that has so long depended on the in-person visit. So a couple of the threads, for consideration when thinking about immersive experience or this metaverse are around education. First and foremost has to be about education. We've seen so many interesting use cases that overlay hotspots so that every visitor can have a deeper level of information about specific, brush strokes or motifs that appear throughout a painting. Secondly, just given the, I guess I want to say the thirst for buzz or raising the bar or tying to different strategies around remaining relevant and engaging millennials, for instance, although I think it should be all audiences as the goal, is this idea around entertainment. So I'll often hear threads and conversations around gamification. How can we make this, 17th century painting more entertaining and more relevant to different and diverse audiences? So you've seen a lot of examples around that. And then what is the utility? So when we just kind of strip it back to visitor experience and kind of the utilitarian components of ensuring the visitor is comfortable and confident, that they can be guided, that they can find that exhibition, that they can find the gift shop, the cafe, the restroom, what have you. They're starting to see some interesting tidbits around guidance or wayfinding. And a couple examples, that my team's had the opportunity to work on involve the first ever solely AR-based museum exhibition in collaboration with the Perez Art Museum in Miami, where really when you talk about Phygital, we were working with an artist who works only in only in physical formats. And this was proposed to be a digital sculpture. It ended up being Apple's the first use of Apple's AR kit in the museum context, and went on to get global recognition across publications and research and so on and so forth, per the boundaries it was pushing in the artistic realm, but also in its conversation with climate change and the fact that virtual sculptures were being presented in the entire exhibition as such. Over in Europe, to be specific, with the Museum of Applied Art and Design over in Vienna, we had an opportunity to create a work that was a new scale and dimensionality to Gustav Klimt's Tree of Life, adding another layer where, you're kind of taking something and giving it, new life, to repeat that phrase. And then another example, again, kind of in this Phygital world, is over in Boston. There's a museum called the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, one of the most famous collections of its kind, for its incredible Italian Renaissance and great masters paintings. And it was home to the largest ever museum heist or art loot in history in a single property. And we brought those stolen works back to their frames using augmented reality. And this has since been featured in hundreds of publications. I just received a book from MIT Press, which prominently features this example of using technology to bring back lost or stolen works as a form of doing what's right, as well as repatriation, as well as education. And one last example, we during the pandemic, we launched an app to help our museum partners to bring the artwork from their collection into people's homes while the museums were closed. And so, during those moments where the physically it was not possible to visit the museum, we wanted to find a way to bring art and culture to your everyday person and your art lover, as well as help the museums. And this got the attention of Apple, was featured as App of the Day, won a Webby Award, and just this week won an award from the St. Petersburg International Culture Forum as a best IT solution. And so this was just yet another way of changing or expanding the idea of what visitor engagement is. What does it look like when augmented reality or virtual means are involved? And some of these projects have been noted by Wired as being part of this transformation. And we've done deeper research that pointed to, just early signs that augmented reality could play a role and could make it easier and more frictionless for visitors, as they approach the museum. And the funny thing about this all is this isn't really what we do. We're not an augmented reality team. We just find it to be really interesting around making it easier to access content. And in a lot of ways, the shift in expectation was, cited as one of the great importance or significance of Pokemon Go, if you remember that phenomenon. And so in looking at that, and again, bridging the physical, we're looking at the physical, but we're overlaying the digital to make the experience of accessing information about the works, experiencing the works, that much more frictionless. So I like to say, if we think of the world as a book, then augmented reality is this digital magnifying glass. And I think in a lot of ways, we're in this moment where we're thinking about the converging of the physical and the digital and how that plays a role. And we're talking about it, in today's context, but in a lot of ways, we're approaching this moment where we're thinking about a new lens, whether we refer to that as the phygital world, whether we think about that from the context of our mobile phones, mixed reality, smart glasses, or what is now being referred to as the metaverse. So that's all I have. That's all I have for this moment. Thank you for the opportunity to present, and I look forward to this conversation today.
It was really
good.
Locations and museums, and of course I think that there are some major questions behind this transformation, which is really involving every museum in the world. The question is whether this means allow to reach more people, or if that is just becoming aware that people education has no more the capability to read, for example, the label of a work to know who is the author or what is representing it. So, tornando all'italiano, che forse posso esprimermi in modo più completo, diciamo, questa domanda.
All right. Actually, I will ask this question again. That is to say, well, my question is, all these technologies, do you think it is useful in order to involve more people? Or don't you think instead that, as it was written today on Corriere della Sera, the main Italian newspaper, don't you think that people nowadays are not able to read anymore? So all the things that were communicated through reading, regardless of a person's personal background, you know, everything that was communicated through something written in the museum, nowadays it is not written anymore because we are not used to reading anymore. So this is why we need to listen to voices, images, and well, this is my question. Thank you, Brendan. Again. All right, so now let's move to Silvia Filippini Fantoni. She is a Deputy Director for Learning and Engagement at Newark Museum of New York. And so now she will keep on talking about the involvement of the community where the museum is located. So Silvia, I'm going to give the floor to you. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for giving me the chance to speak today. Unfortunately, I'm not in Rome today. Well, actually, today I decided to speak in English because, as I told you, I spent most of my career abroad. So now I'm going to switch to English.
My name is Silvia Filippini Fantoni. I am the Deputy Director of Learning and Engagement at the Newark Museum of Art. Don't worry if you've never heard of the Newark Museum of Art, you're not the only one. But we happen to be the largest museum in New Jersey, which is about 20 minutes away from Newark City. And we are kind of a strange, eclectic museum. We have a collection mainly of art, art from Asian, Africa, American art, Native American art, ancient Mediterranean art. But we also have a very big science collection from specimen to herbaria. And as well as you can see a little bit of it in the photo, part of the building is an historic house from the late 19th century, so a Victorian home. And believe it or not, we also have a very small planetarium. So it's quite an interesting and exciting and eclectic institution. We, like many museums, I think I went too far, fast. Like many, I think there's a slide missing for some reason. I will just improvise the slide. But like many museums in the United States, we had to shut down during the pandemic. On March 14th, the museum closed, and it was closed for about a year and a half. And even though the museum didn't really have a lot of experience with virtual programs, we pivoted very quickly, and within the first 2 weeks, we already offered our first virtual program. Throughout the year and a half that we were close to the public, we were able to engage about 30,000 people through Zoom, thanks to our virtual programs, and then 130,000 live on social media, because most of our programs are broadcasted live on social media. So there was a high participation, high satisfaction, and we were also able to reach with our virtual program audiences that we didn't really connect with before, particularly at the national and international level. We had a lot of people joining in from the UK, from France, from different parts of America, and this really opened up an opportunity to reach a new audience that it wouldn't have reached otherwise. So it was a great opportunity for us. Independently from whether we are doing a public program, developing an exhibition, or doing a physical program, we really believe strongly in the Newark Museum of Art that we have to engage people through these 5 different strategies that you see on the screen now. And this is particularly important if we want to try to engage a more diverse and younger audience, because these are key elements to connect with this group, but we know that they're also successful with all ages and all groups. And these strategies are participation, play, immersion, relevance, and community. And it's interesting to see that Brandon mentioned most of these strategies as well. So as you can see, it kind of, these strategies resonate across the field of museum. I'm going to give you a few examples of what we've done, both online, virtually, and on-site, physically. And then we hopefully can then see if this connects and resonates with you and your own groups and your own community, and hopefully we can talk a little bit more about them afterwards. The first of this strategy is participation. It is very important for us that the experience that we offer, even if it's a virtual program like today, they are not passive experience. We want to engage in a dialogue with our public. We want them to participate, to be active participant in the experiences that we provide. And we did do some testing and some analysis, and we know that when we offer these kind of experiences, we attract and engage a younger audience. For instance, I want to give you the example of these two virtual programs that we did, Art Olympics and Battle of the Words. You know, we do offer virtual programs that are more lecture-based with final Q&A, but this was very much of an effort on our part to try to create and bring in participation into programs. Art Olympics is a competition between museums that the Newark Museum of Art started last year. We have two museums competing with each other. We select 10 categories. The categories are fun and playful. They go from like scariest object in your collection to best hipster haircut. So they are fun and playful. And then each museum has 1 minute to explain why a specific object, present an object from its collection that connects with that category. And then the public on Zoom or on social media gets to vote for who wins that battle. And then at the end, whoever wins the most category wins the Art Olympics. And we've done this many times, 8-9 times. People love it. We get great feedback. And this has really helped us expanding our audience because we partner with museum in Canada, museum in the UK, museums in the US. And so we really acquire that audience through this program. Similar example is Art Face Off, Battle of the Words. This is, again, a similar thing. So it's a competition between artists. So we give artists 45 minutes to create, during a virtual event, a work of art inspired by a theme or an object in our collection. And then people get to vote for their favorite, and then the winner gets to develop a capsule collection with our store and sell their products in the museum store. And it's really interesting because even during the battle, while the artists are creating, we play music, we launch polls. So there's a lot of interaction with the audience through this program, and it's really great to see how people love to engage and participate. Similarly, we've just launched an exhibition on site called Endangered at the museum, and this exhibition talks about endangered species. And one of the things that we wanted to provide was the opportunity for people to participate by making a pledge, by allowing them to pick a pledge to decide whether they pledge to use more public transportation or use more recyclable bags or, sorry. And they do that, they can make a pledge during the visit, and then they get to see how other people have pledged, and that's projected in the space. So again, participation is absolutely key to engage various audience. Another strategy that's very important, and I think Brendan mentioned it, is the gamification, play. People want to learn while having fun. You kind of don't want to read, you want to kind of do things, and while doing things, kind of learn about things. And these are kind of 3 fun examples that we've done, all virtual programs. We actually partner with some stand-up comedian in Jersey City, which is a city nearby, and they did a hard roast of our collection. So they picked objects, they picked them apart, they created a joke about it, alternative title, alternative narrative, funny songs about crazy things in our collection. It was a very, very fun event. And again, just being more playful and not taking ourselves a little too seriously. As I mentioned, we do have a historic mention, a Victorian home in our building. And we kind of said, why don't we create a virtual escape room experience? You know, we can create a game where people, by solving puzzles, they kind of move from room to room until they get to the code that allows them to leave the house. And this is a game that is a facilitated game. People cannot play them on their own. We have 2 facilitators, group of 50 people that we divide in breakout rooms, and then each of them has 45 minutes each group to sort the puzzle until they get all the way to the end of the game. And all the puzzles are really about the history of the house, the history of Newark, and there's a little bit of science as well built in it so that we can connect with high schools as well. given the success of this escape room, which actually won a few awards, we developed a murder mystery, again, set at the museum. It's a little bit similar to the Ballantine House, but it has more character development and character interaction here. So it's not just puzzle, but also people talking to the potential suspects of this murder that kind of happened and took place at the museum 20 years before. And people get to also interact with a technician that can help, analyze scientifically some of the clues and help them figure out whether, this was actually a murder and who the suspect and who the murderer was. So again, we use our museum, we use our collection, we use our space virtually and physically to create game opportunities. Next, this is another one that, of course, is not new to you. Ren mentioned it. But it's interesting because it's a different type of immersion than AR and VR. In this case, it's kind of physical immersion. People want to be connecting with content and ideas through multiple senses and physically by interacting and walking into the space. And so this is something that we really feel strongly about. We've just opened 2 exhibitions, an Audubon exhibition and a Cy Wolfak exhibition. She's an American artist, and both of them include immersive experience. The Audubon one, for instance, I don't know if you're familiar with John James Audubon. Was a 19th century artist. He created this beautiful book called The Birds of America with 437 depiction of birds in the United States. These birds are incredible. We scan them at high resolution, we animate them, and we kind of set them in these 3 different environments. And we added sound. So people are really walking into a world that doesn't exist anymore because most of these species are unfortunately extinct or they're very endangered. But it's the idea of connecting with the subject matter of endangerment and extinction at a much deeper level. And I'm very proud to say that also next year we're working with a artist collective in Japan called Teen Lab. They do great immersive experiences, and we're going to bring one of their experience called the Sketch Ocean at the museum. We're almost done. The next, I think this was the out of order slide, but let's skip it. The other strategy that we feel very, very strongly about is we try to be very, very relevant to what's going we want to be relevant to our community. We want to be connected with what's going on in the world today. We want to talk about things that our audience cares about, and particularly audience in our own town, in our own city of Newark. Newark is one of the most diverse cities in the United States, with a majority African American and Latinx population. And these are very, very important topics, social justice, inequality, white supremacists, racism, environmental issue, incarceration is a big problem, particularly in the African American community. We also have an ICE, which is one of those immigration center here in Newark, where people are arrested and deported. And so these are very important subjects for the city, for the community. And we make sure that we do virtual programs and physical programs that connect these ideas, this topic, with objects in our collections and with our exhibitions. Final strategy, which I would say last but not least, actually the most important strategy, is really creating a deeper connection with the community. We consider ourselves a museum of the community, and for us the community is mostly Newark, the city of Newark. We were already thinking about this before the pandemic, but with the pandemic, that has become even more of a reality. Nobody's traveling anymore, and really deeply connecting with our city and our community has become an absolute priority. And there are many different ways in which we do that. The first thing is really engaging and connecting with local artists and organizations in many different ways. We invite artists to be part of our virtual program. We work on them on exhibition. We acquired a lot of local artists. In the last year, we only acquired local artists, for instance. We develop a collection for our store with local artists. So we try to engage them in many, many different ways. And we've really expanded that in the last couple of years, despite the pandemic. Another important aspect is that you need to go where people are, not expect them necessarily to come to us. And that's particularly challenging in Newark because the museum is downtown where all the buildings and the office buildings are, and nobody's working from the offices anymore, they're working from home. So we really made an effort during the pandemic to go out and develop programs out in the community, particularly in the parks, because we needed to be outdoor. And that has been a very successful strategy, which we are continuing now despite the winter season. Finally, the last aspect, it's really importance of co-creating with the community. We have developed an advisory committee that has 15 representatives of our community, and we work with them to develop different projects. This is the image here is really an example of something. One of the things that this committee said to us was like, we don't see ourselves represented in the museum. The city of Newark doesn't see themselves represented in the museum. And so during the summer, when we went out and did programs out in the community, we hired a professional photographer to take professional photos of some of the people that attended this program. And this is one of the girls that was at one of our events. And we really now are exhibiting these images in the museum because we want people to feel like the museum is a place for them and they are welcome here. So this is my presentation, and I look forward to the discussion later. Thank you for giving me this opportunity again.
Grazie molte Silvia per questa bellissima presentazione, per questi ulteriori suggerimenti ed esempi che ancora in particolare in Italia, perché questo evento qui è fatto particolarmente proprio rivolto allo sviluppo dei musei del nostro paese, e può essere veramente un caso di studio, un esempio interessante per questa necessità fondamentale del rapporto con la comunità dove il museo si trova, che sia più stretto possibile, per questo tuo suggerimento, riferimento alla co-creazione. E proprio questo che mi consente di annunciare il prossimo speaker, che è Umberto Avanzi, che su questo ha anche scritto dei libri, quindi io non vedo l'ora di ascoltare la tua presentazione, Umberto, e ti ascoltiamo con attenzione.
About this, so we give the floor to Umberto. Thank you. Umberto Avanzi. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you for all the people participating here. First of all, personally, I do not have a background in museums and arts. I've been working on market surveys for 40 years, but over the last 10 years, I've been developing market surveys for museums. And I also developed some tools and experiences for museums, and all this resulted in this book, which is not the main subject of my topic of my presentation. I would rather talk about visitor engagement. But first of all, what engagement is, and what does it mean in particular for a museum? Now, I would like to present some measuring tools and practical experiences for the measurement of the visitor engagement. Now, I would like to skip the definition of engagement, and I would rather focus on pillars of engagement. When it comes to museum engagement, well, basically, it refers to the experience, either virtual or physical. So the experience of the visitor, and as the previous speaker said, the visitor is looking for an active role when visiting a museum. So visitors want to play an active role during the visit. So the experience is one of the pillars for the development of the visitor engagement. Second pillar is the relationship, which is created between the visitor and the museum, because it is indeed the relationship between the two that creates a passion and a willingness to be co-creators. And this is what visitors are looking for. So when I started to work on these topics. And let me also point out that I've been collaborating for 6 years with the museums owned by Banca Intesa in Milan, Naples and Vicenza. So I came up with some tools for measuring the engagement. Now, the first tool is named Experience Wheel. It is quite an easy one. So you see, basically, visitors are given this wheel and are asked to assess, you see, the different items, for example, curiosity or stimulation. So in order to measure, to assess the feelings of visitors, you see there are two main axes, the vertical from active to passive, and the horizontal one from positive feelings to negative ones. I won't give you all details about all the feelings that you have here. Rather, there are 4 main areas. So positive and active is stimulation, so the inspiring, the visit has been inspiring, stimulated for the visitor. Positive and passive, this is satisfaction, so the visitor was satisfied with the visit. If we have passing and negative, this means the visit was not satisfactory. And if we have negative active feelings, well, this is the area of rejection. Let's move to the second tool, which refers to relationship. And so the tool is a relationship wheel. We are asking visitors what type of relationship they have established with, for example, the artist in case of exhibition, or with the museum body, the museum authority offering the visit to the museum. And so once again, you see on the vertical axis, we have, let's say, emotional feelings on top or rational feelings at the bottom, whereas the horizontal axis, we still have a negative and positive. Also in this case, we identified 4 major areas. For example, we have the empathetic area, which is very important. This means a positive relationship with a high engagement. Here you have, for example, esteem, trust, friendship. I mean, this is empathy, empathetic one. Then there is another positive area, but more rational one. And this means it is a more functional relationship, which means a learning and an advantage. Let's say a visit has been beneficial for the visitor. Then there are the 2 negative areas. We have rational and negative, which means that the relationship is inadequate. And then you have the ones, the negative and emotional one, which is a disturbed one. Now let me show you how the tools can be applied to museums. In particular, I applied these tools to the 3 museums I mentioned, which are, let's say, less common than the others, but they indeed have really nice and interesting collections. So this is the result scheme. So you have the results of the museums of important businesses, so the brands, I mean the companies are not indicated here. I did it on purpose, but first of all, you see the positivity. So Museum A only had positive reactions, so 100% positive reactions, which is quite difficult to reach. It's not quite easy, whereas for the others, the positivity level is a bit lower. Then you have, of course, stimulation, satisfaction, non-satisfaction and rejection. Then once again, you see here the relationship wheel, case history. So we have the museums owned by businesses. Museum A is very much appreciated. You see positivity level is quite high, but the others have some negative reactions, for example, Museum E in particular. So this tool is quite useful because you can improve, negative aspects. The aspects considered negative by visitors, or the ones that which are not satisfactory to visitors. For example, when it comes to functionality, you see some negative scores, but also in this case, you have some positivity indexes. So these two ways are analyzed by our software. So we have a proprietary software, and the result of the analysis is the engagement index. For the, let's say, company-owned museums, we analyzed the experience, let's say, and the relationship towards the brand before the visit to the museum, because some visitors already, let's say, knew the brand and already had some touch points with the brand. So we measured, let's say, the engagement with brand before the visit. You see, scores are quite high. You see the benchmark here. I have to say the brands are very well-known ones and very much appreciated. So you see that even before the visit, the engagement index is quite high. And after the visit, also considering the relationship established with the brand, well, you see that the engagement has increased towards the brand. So this means that company-owned museums are not just let's say, a jewel, a very nice place. They are also a marketing tool. Also, because of the pandemic, museums can offer something more than physical visits. In particular, they are now offering virtual visits. And why shall we assess the engagement? Why is it important to know the engagement resulting from the visitor experience? Well, first of all, because if there is a high engagement level, we will have also a net promoter score, which means that people recommend and suggest a visit to friends or family. So a high engagement results in an increase of the number of visitors. But on top of that, the engagement, a high engagement, is also associated with the intention to return to the museum. And finally, a high engagement is at the basis of a co-creation activity with the visitor. The previous speakers have already talked about this, about co-creation, and you can find a number of examples in this book. I wrote together with the couple and Sacerdotes. So the title is Il Museo Dialogante. So it is a let's say, a talking, let's say, museum. And in this book, you will find actually the results of the service carried out on the visitor engagement. The visitor is not a simple visitor, is it rather a visit actor? Thank you. This is it for my presentation. Thank you. Thank you so much for such an interesting presentation, Umberto. Thank you also for sharing the results of your surveys that point out that the emotional, the psychological aspect is so important when it comes to the visitor experience. And in a way, these emotions guide visitors. It is important to create, let's say, live relations where visitors are really engaged. And this is actually our personal experience. The more we are able to transfer content that involve visitors, of course, the more engaged the visitor will be. In the end, the culture experience is really at, let's say, at the center. I mean, it's something that makes you happy. It's a very sort of a spiritual experience. And we need such emotion, such happiness. And very often we, we hear people talking about the economic, of course, the economic aspects of museums, and but also to, let's say, to introduce the next speaker, working for a public body, where we have to say that if, the visit to the museum is a moment of happiness, well, this really means to satisfy the visitor's expectations. So we should not only, think of the revenues. There is actually something more. There is a benefit for the citizens, for the visitors, who can really enjoy the museums. So, for example, after visiting our museums in Rome, tourists and visitors go back home and are extremely satisfied and happy with their own experience. Now we have Vittoria Marini Clarelli, Superintendent for the Cultural Heritage, and basically she is in charge of the assets and heritage managed by the administration of Rome. So we now would like to hear some more practical, let's say, aspects when it comes to the management of museums and visitor experience. Thank you. Right. So good morning. I would like to talk about COVID impact on the relationship with visitors. One of my colleagues participated in the panel, and to us, the major problem is re-establishing the relationship with visitors after this experience. And I think that all museums have learned something from the pandemic, and we cannot go back, as we have often said. The museums of Rome, of Roma Capitale, include many museums, the capital museums, but also small ones, such as the Free Museum in Villa Borghese. So we include different museums, different sizes, different audience, and I think that since 3 years now, we are offering a €5 subscription for a card that lets you visit the museums of Roma Capitale free of charge, except for 2 exhibitions which are held there. So I think that locals fully exploited this opportunity, and I have to say that they are now back. So all the holders of these cards were involved in the inauguration ceremonies, and they really involved friends, because they could also donate the card to other locals and other citizens. And so this is extremely important for, in particular, Capital Museum, the museums of Rome, which are most attended by tourists. So visitors came back, and in particular in Italy, in May 2020, when the museums were reopened after the lockdown, and visitors were interviewed, and actually many new visitors came to the museum, because there was no, the long queues that was, let's say, something they didn't like. And so we shared many contents with visitors. In terms of ordinary activity, the museums in Rome, in particular, the ones which are not free of charge, they offer a virtual tour which offers an immersive experience. But before this experience, many people were not even aware of this opportunity, and I have to say that now visits are being prepared, and also the final monitoring of the experience is something that which is done, and people go back to the let's say to the website of the museum to see what they could see on the website. And so that was let's say an addition, a benefit for visitors, in order to consolidate also the experience. And of course this means also engagement, which is so important in order to also to particular to get to know more about our visitors. We also offer products specially designed for, let's say, virtual visits to the museum, and so they are now part of our archives. Now, I do apologize, I cannot show you the slides. I am just talking because I really cannot move the slides and show you the presentation. However, I have to say that many activities were carried out with different audiences. we organize also games for kids. I think that a lot of museums did the same when it comes to, let's say, games offered to or specific tours for kids. So we have received feedback by visitors, and based on the feedback, we could assess the quality of our offer during such a difficult time. In particular, social networks were extremely active during these types of surveys. As Professor Nigro was saying, the relationship between museums and happiness, I mean, that was quite clear. Also during the lockdown, people, were staying at home. They had more time, and we offered tours and experiences, specially designed, for the virtual visit, virtual tours, and those were emotional experiences for the visitors. Interfaces have changed as well. We wanted to people to get to know the highlights of the museum. Well, of course, we're not saying, that some, let's say, artifacts are more important than others, but we also listen to the public, to the preferences of the audience. And today we know that when it comes to museums experience, well, we offered, for example, single artifacts, single works to visitors. Also, Google Arts and Culture was something used, and there are, of course, museums participating in this. For example, the tree by Clint presented during the first presentation. We, for example, shared an exhibition about Clint. And in some cases, I have to say that actually visitors appreciated this. And this type of experience, as Umberto Avanzi said, made us understand that there are some differences when there is a real relationship with the visitor, and visitors become interested in things which are sometimes unexpected. I remember I once organized an exhibition, and I removed a painting, and a person, came to me and said, well, you removed the painting that I mostly liked, and that was, quite unexpected to me. It is important to get feedback by visitors. So in particular, the paintings or works of art they like the most. We also took advantage, let's say, of the pandemic to offer augmented reality experiences, which are quite new. We are about to open an exhibition with a partner which patented an electric bus with the screens, and so basically you thanks to, I mean, you are on the bus and you see the Forum Imperiale, so you can see the Roman monuments and how they were in the past. You can really actually go along these roads, and you can see how it was and how the monuments were, and you can also let's say experience the daily life of the Roman time. We have for example, the reenactment of the, let's say, of the market, a construction site, so you can virtually walk around, and you are basically on the bus, and you can have such an experience. Of course, I mean, quality is very important. So you are on the bus, you have the windows, you can see how the place is now, but the important thing, I think, is not also to give visitors too much stuff. I mean, glasses or different devices. We are wearing masks, and that's enough. So it is important for visitors to be free to move and to walk and to see. Investments were also made by also using funds made available through the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, which was launched after the pandemic, and so we now have funding for a number of cultural activities aimed at also, for example, adopting and using apps concerning the territory and the relationship between museums and territory. I have to say that in Rome, at least when it comes to municipal museums, there is a good trend at the moment. In our region, we kept museums open during the week. From June, tourists came back. So in June, tourists came back, and museums were opened during the weekend. In the first 10 months of 2021, total visitors were 500,000. And if you consider, let's say, the restrictions in terms of number of visitors to museums, I mean, there was a 50% restrictions, but from October, actually since the 15th of October, museums are now open, and let's say there are no more restrictions except for having the green pass for visitors, and the number of visitors have increased if compared to 2020, and now there is a new exhibition which opened in October, actually at the end of October, 27th of October, and already more than 30,000 people came to see it. And it is really the trend at the moment. So people want to go back to normal life and also to museums. And waiting for such a long time, and using the website or social networks, I mean, preparing visitors through our website and social networks, basically visitors were looking forward to come back to the museums. At least for the moment, this is the trend. Thank you. Clarelli for sharing this good news indeed. Personally, I have the card you mentioned with my family. I thought it to be a very good idea, and this is something that museums are using and doing. Now I give the floor to Marina Maria Serena Nuovo, the Secretary of the National Association of Archeologi Lazio. The floor to you, thank you.
Ok, buonasera a tutti. Condivido la presentazione con la mia collega.
Right, good afternoon. I would like to share my presentation, the presentation together with my colleague, who's going to talk about the audience in the civic museums of the metropolitan area of Rome. Good afternoon. This work was presented at the end of May 2021 within our association with the aim of focusing our attention to the people working in archaeological museums. Indeed, our association has been working for more than 15 years to promote the role and the work of archaeologists in all sectors, including museums. So our idea was to monitor the presence of archaeologists in the museums in the Lazio region. In particular, we focused on the cities of the metropolitan area of Rome, such as the Granto Museum, which is a territorial museum of Rome castles, and also the museums of art, ethnography, and geology. These are, let's say, not so known museums, but they are extremely important in order to raise awareness about the heritage of our territory. Because of the pandemic, well, of course, data made us think about the pandemic and how it affected the visitors. We compared many strategies implemented in order to fight against pandemic, and in particular we focused on new technologies and social media applied to museums. The survey is underway, so data are not, let's say, final one, and they refer only to a small sample. So conclusions already refer to the case studies analyzed and might be slightly different in the future when further data will be presented. In terms of methods, well, our survey was carried out by interviewing the directors of the museums, and communication was started. We exchanged views and opinions with them, but looking at the specific features of each museum. These museums are placed in small and medium-sized cities from 19,000 to 39,000 inhabitants. So the museums are really associated to the territory they are placed in. The archaeological museums of Urbano, Laziane, Alatri, Artena, Lanuvio, Fornello, Bracciano were analyzed. And in particular, the municipality of Alatri was taken into account, although it is not part of the metropolitan area of Rome. because this is part of the Grand Turk Museum. Let's start from Albano Laziale. The interview with the director of the museum highlighted the fact that the museum is a small one and is associated with the territory. The museum is in Palazzo Ferraioli in the city center, and it is an example of Renaissance building. 5 rooms are available on the ground floor. Artifacts and archaeological findings are described in the panels, and specific information is also provided for schools. The museum is also used as, let's say, a center for exhibitions or food and wine events, during which free of charge tours are organized. The director sometimes needs volunteers to open the archaeological areas associated with the museum. The museum is part of the Grand Museum. It has a Facebook page and also some papers online which are made available to scholars for the purpose of improving knowledge. Starting from March 2021, a new initiative about art story was implemented in order to share videos and also on Facebook. The Museum of Athena is in an agricultural building built many years ago, and it was actually used for agricultural purposes. The museum was inaugurated in 2016. The collection has findings, archaeological findings, related to excavations carried out for 20 years in the territory. The findings are dated from the Neolithic to the Middle Ages. There are specific and precise information about all the findings provided to the visitors. Mr. Valenti is the director of the museum, and he said that he has no staff, no personnel, and so actually such a museum could be very much appreciated by tourists and citizens, but unfortunately because of the lack of staff they cannot keep it open. Then the third museum is part of the same network. It has 3 sections, archaeological one, and one anthropological one, and it offers also multimedia presentation. The director is also the director of the Civic Museum of Lanubio, and there is also administrative staff, but there is also external staff which is properly trained. Before the pandemic, the museum mostly attracted schools and students, and the director said that it is paramount to involve different audiences, thanks to events, for example, which are also recreational events